Hello from me, Lazar. We continue with the next lesson of the course, the HTML course. Last time we started Chapter 8, HTML elements related to text formatting, and we reached point 8.3. Text formatting elements. Before I start the presentation of the specific items, I would like to pay attention to you on some things. As I already mentioned at the beginning of the chapter, many items have already been dropped and are not supported in HTML5, but I'll go over it briefly, the more used of them, at the end of each point, which are related to the topic in it. Another feature here is the presence of very similar elements, and even such that do the same thing. And it can be very confusing, especially for a person who is just starting out and has no experience with this stuff. It's hard to do at all accurate classification because many of items can fit simultaneously in several different categories. With all this in mind, I will try to simplify as much as possible the exposition of these elements, and therefore I will present you only the most used ones. We start with the header elements, which are H1 to H6. The text that is placed in their content accepts certain formatting default by browsers: larger size, fattening, suitable for titles with different size in the web page. Of course, using CSS we can change the formatting on the page and title. A peculiarity here is that the larger the number, the less the title. That is, here the smallest heading is H6 and the largest is H1. So, headings as well as paragraphs have an alignment attribute, which works the same way and with the same syntax and the same values. We recall the syntax as it was, of this type, alignment equal to some value. But this alignment attribute, however, no longer supported in HTML5. And instead, the style attribute can be used. Here is an example where we will display all titles in sequence. Here is the code in the editor, and the result in the browser will be as follows. So, the next subpoint is physical formatting elements. These are the following items, and in early versions all items for word processing HTML were like that. Under items for physical formatting is considered elements that physical change the text, make it bold, underlined, italicized and others, but without that to relate to and mean something to search engines, spiders and robots who browse and search the internet, and index the sites. 7500:3:57,319-00:04:07,640. I will show the more important ones, which are tag B from English bold, bolds the text; tag I, from English italic, for italic text, italic; tag U, from English underline, underlines the text; tag S, from English strike out, cross out the text; tag sup, from English superscript. Used for superscript; tag sub, from English subscript, used for subscript. Here are some of the outdated ones. HTML5 unsupported elements: strike tag, strikes out the text; tag TT, from English teletype, text with equal character width. And the font tag, choice for text font, it was one of the most used items previous versions of HTML, the font tag remember it very well. Because you might meet him on older sites. The font element can contain the following attributes. Face equals font name, sets font for the text. The most popular fonts as we know are Arial, Times New Roman, Georgia, Verdana, Courier New, and others. We will talk about fonts in a separate chapter. The next attribute is size equals text size, sets text size, can be set in two ways, with digits 1 through 7 as 1 is the smallest and 7 is the largest, and with values relative to the default text, e.g. +1 the text will be twice as big, a value of -1 will make the text twice as small, and so on. Color equals text color, sets text color in three ways, 1 by using RGB in decimal code, 2 by using hex in hexadecimal value, 3 by the name of the color, in English. Here's an example of using the font tag in the editor. And here's what you get in the browser. It is part of one poem, Bulgarian, of the poet Yevorov. Now, let's pay attention again. Let's pay attention to is the font element is deprecated from the language standards and not supported by XHTML1, from the old declaration and from HTML5. Using it is not a good practice. And to set the font, text size, color, CSS properties should already be used. This is how it should be written, such an example by today's standards with paragraph style set, and the result is the same or close. So, the next point is items for logical marking. At this point, we'll take a look at the three most used elements. At a later stage in the development of HTML appears the idea to include more and more items for logical text marking, and in HTML5 not only the text, but also for formatting of the page and its logical division into parts. Under logical marking there is meant to mean something about machines. The idea of it in its essence is to provide more and more information for search engines under the plausible pretext that this is being done because of the people. And actually it's not like that. It is the people who remain in the background, therefore I do not agree with this logic. Moving on, the more important elements for logical text formatting are, tag strong, indicates to search engines that this is an important text, but without setting any particular formatting. The default browsers show the text in its content as in element B, that is, bold. Tag M, from English emphasis, tells search engines that this is text, which should be emphasized. But without specifying any particular formatting. The default browsers they perceive it and show it as at the element, in italics. There are also other elements on which browsers generally show their content in the same way, in italics, which I think is confusing. These are, tag DFN, from English definition, for terms that occur for the first time. The cite tag in HTML4 was used for citations, and in HTML5 for working titles. Tag var, from English variable, for variables in computer programs. So does the third other tag, which we will look at is ins, from English inserted, indicates to the search engines that this is text that has been added in the new version of the document. It also doesn't set any formatting. Browsers display the text by default in its content as with the element U, that is, they underline the text. Here are a few more tags. The del tag, from English deleted, indicates to the search engines that this is text that was deleted in the new one version of the document, and so does not set formatting. Browsers display it as strike-through text by default. Code tag indicates to search engines that it is code from a computer program, without specifying any formatting. The default browsers display the text as in the tag att, that is equal character width text. And here there are more elements, on that browsers display by default the same way, with equal character width, which I think is confusing. These are KBD, from English keyboard, for a text which must be entered from the keyboard. SAMP, from English sample, for text that appears result of the output of a computer program. ABBR, from English abbreviation, currently also used instead of the for element acronym, serves for logical separation of abbreviation or acronym, as in the browser SE shows highlighted with a dashed line. It can also be used with the title attribute, which serves as a hint when placing the mouse over it. As explanations, here we show an example, and the result in the browser is like this: tag small, sets by small text with one conditional unit, as there are in the font tag, where the text was in units from 1 to 7, may be inserted more elements with each other. And so it is reduced the text with two conditional units. It is mainly used in the legal documents where with small font are written such disadvantageous for us and in general for the customer clauses. In previous versions of HTML had tag big, which had the opposite effect on the tag small, to increase. There are also such elements, but as I already mentioned, I won't take a look at them all. Some of the others will be considered in the following points of this chapter. Now something very important. When and what elements to use. When to use elements with logical tagging and when for physical formatting. This is a question that does not exist unequivocal answer. We see that the trend in HTML5 is to use more and more elements for logical marking, but there are specialists who do not endorse this opinion. Me too. And we think it should, according to the situation, to consider what items to use. That's my opinion too. Specifically, this means that logically elements will be used when you want the search engines to know and see important parts of the text as highlighted. Well, when it comes down to it, yes, highlight or single out a particular word or phrase from a given text, to use items for physical formatting. I will give an example with the computer side tutorials we used for the meta elements. Now we will put for example init content and we will use part of the text handling elements. Here is what the result will be. Here we just put several such elements in the browser. This will be according to this lesson. Best regards.